Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Happy Friday to everyone. I'm your host Manny Maradiegue. On the last episode of this week, bringing you guys some more NFL topics and stories that I wanted to get into today to kind of wrap up the week, wrap up what's been going on at the NFL Combine, especially today, leading into tomorrow with the quarterbacks now arriving at the Combine. And that leads me into my biggest story today. Caleb Williams spoke earlier this morning, here still on Eastern Time, at the NFL Combine. And he had some interesting things to say that I wanted to get into and kind of break down here for you guys what I thought of it and what it could potentially mean. I also wanted to start off with the chip shot story, like always, talking about the Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent, and his comments on the very controversial Tush push that has become a lot more popular over the last season, leading into the one before that, and what he thinks about it and his thoughts on potentially banning it, if he's for it or not. That's coming up in just a few seconds. After that, I wanted to talk some trade talks in the NFL, some rumors, really most of all, and also the bigger story that the Browns general manager potentially pushing for a pushback on the trade deadline and all the stuff involved with that. And then in the second half of the show, I'll just give you a free agency update on more rumors and some stuff that has been finalized and concrete over the last few days. Now that February has come to an end and we're entering March, I wanted to bring you guys some more updates on that. That'll be in the second half of the show. And I'll start it off now with the chip shot segment. But before I get into that, I want to remind you guys to, again, please use the tip and donations link with any questions that you may have there. You can see it running across the ticker below me. The tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Again, if you're listening to this, it's gsmcpodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to read your question on the air. Whenever you guys get a chance to comment, engage with me during these live episodes, using that link, I'm able to see it on there and read the question on air and have more of a discussion with you guys. It's also a massive help for the show, for the network, and all the shows on it, and we greatly appreciate it every time you guys are able to do that. That being said, I'm able to jump into the first segment, as always, the chip shot segment of the show, and I wanted to get into the Tush push. That is one of the topics of conversation leading off with the theme that I've kind of had going this week over some potential rule changes. I mentioned the drop hip tackles potentially being banned. I also touched on earlier in the week on some other rule changes that could be coming to the NFL. The kickoff format, I just thought of it, I just remembered that the kickoff format that also could be changed that the competition committee is looking into. Now they're talking about the Tush push. A lot of people have their own thoughts about it, whether you're for it or against it. It's always been in the news. The more prevalent team that uses it to the best of their abilities is the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're the ones that kind of came up with the whole term Tush push, the brotherly shove, if you will, in other terms. But regardless of what you want to call it, it's always been a topic of conversation. Really, in all their games, it's always brought up. They always do it multiple times during the game in short yardage situations. And say what you want about it, subjectively, it's a very effective play. You can't deny that. It's almost a freebie when it's fourth and short, 4th and 1, maybe 4th and 2, for any team to line up in it, go for it. And basically, if you're if you're unaware of it, it's basically like a QB sneak, but you got usually two people lined up behind the quarterback. At least the way the Eagles did it, they had two people lined up behind him. And once he snaps the ball, quarterback goes down, they sneak it, but they also have two guys pushing him from behind, trying to get those extra yards if they need to. And it works about like 99% of the time, 98% of the time, and it's very surprising when it doesn't work. But that's kind of where this whole issue starts to boil up a little bit because, some people may say that it's too overpowered. It's dangerous potentially for, the guys that end up at the bottom of the pile. And it's so close range, such tight quarters that, some guys might get hurt in there. And you got guys jumping over now the pile just to stop it. And it could hurt the quarterback if it hits him wrong in the top of the head or something like that. And there's all these questions around it, issues that people like to bring up. So now that we're in the off season, this is a time to really talk it over. If this is really an issue, this is the time to solve it. And the Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent, they kind of asked him about it at the NFL Combine. I'm pretty sure it was NBC, or that's where at least I saw one of the outlets that interviewed him about it and brought it up to him. And the general feeling that he communicated to them was that, the tush push is generally the sensation around the league, generally around the tush push, is that it's more of a credit to the Eagles that they found a short yardage situation, formation, play that just works so well for them. He goes on to say, why would we punish them for finding almost like a loophole in a play in the game of football? Why would they punish them for doing that, being creative enough to find a way to create something that nobody else has really thought of or has done it to the level of execution or to the level of excellence that they've done it in? So those were his opening remarks. He did have the other side of it, the understanding side that other teams might still, feel a certain way about it, not agree with it completely. And he went on to say in the interview that I saw that the NFL Competition Committee is still, discussing about it, or that they actually didn't discuss it at the meeting at the Combine because everyone mostly agrees on it on the Competition Committee, and that's only a handful of teams. But he did go on to say that at the other league meetings, probably in Florida or down in Miami at the end of March, I think it's the 27th or the 24th to the 27th, they'll have their league meeting. Again, that's where more owners and really the whole league gets together and talks these things out. And he said it'll be brought up, he's sure, again there, and they'll talk about it more there to give other teams that aren't on the competition committee their time to speak on it and give some reasons why they feel it should stay or why they feel it should be banned on the other hand. But just to give you my thoughts on it, I kind of alluded to it before. It's not like the Eagles are the only team that can do it. Everyone is able to do it. It's just if they feel that they have the personnel to do it. Not everybody has the Eagles' offensive line. They're obviously really good at it because of their offensive line. And just on the injury part of it, you haven't really seen too many injuries come because of the tush push or things that are involved with the tush push. The only big one I do remember is Patrick Mahomes when he injured his knee really bad in that game there. I forget who it was. I'm pretty sure it was in the playoffs, but he hurt it really bad I think 2 years ago now. And that was like a real scare for him, not only because he's Patrick Mahomes, but because it was a really serious knee injury. And it could have been worse. Thankfully it wasn't, but that was the only real injury issue that I remember seeing with the tush push. Other than that, it might take everyone to get up off of each other, but it seems to be over really quick. It doesn't last more than 10 seconds, 15 at most, and everybody just props up after a while, and they just continue on with the drive. And like I mentioned, everyone is able to do it, so I don't see why the league would punish just one team and force everyone not to do it just to stop making the Eagles seem so overpowered with this one play. On top of it, it's such a routine-ish play. Like, there's not too much that goes into it that you can really change about it. If I were to think about what I would change if the league does decide to go further with this, I think the only thing you could really change is have nobody push the quarterback, or maybe just limit it to one person pushing the quarterback. Maybe two's too overpowered. The league could say only one person is able to line up behind him, have their hands on his backside and push him. Or you could limit it to a certain amount of times you do it per drive, or per half, or per halves, or even per game. That's another thing that you can do just off the top of my head. So the Eagles aren't always lining up in the tush push formation every third down. Say they get 3rd and 1 like 4 times in a drive. It's very demoralizing for the defense. I get it. But on the other side, if it's so demoralizing, do something about it. Really is what it comes down to. If you don't like it, do something about it. Try and stop them to get them to stop and stop running it. But that's another thing I felt that they could do. Limit it to the amount of time. It's probably per drive. I think per game would be a little bit too extreme. If you do it per game, you might as well ban it instead of keeping count. If you go that route, I feel like you're going to get more iterations of the tush push. More people are going to try to change the finest detail about what is considered a tush push, and then you're going to get a whole other argument of like, oh no, that wasn't a tush push, that shouldn't count on the number of times we can do it, or yeah, like that should have been a tush push, and it just gets too complicated and it'll slow the game down a lot more. The game's already like 4 hours long. If you get into all these small details, if they're able to be reviewed, the game's going to be too long. It's going to feel like a baseball game, and the way baseball's going with how long the game is, they've had to speed it up because nobody could stay or pay attention for that long. Football's the next longest one, so I think that'll just make it longer, and it might hurt you in some other areas like that. But it is funny just because of how efficient everyone's been with it. There was a period of time when the Eagles were really efficient with it 2 seasons ago, and they were just killing everybody. They were on a roll. They were probably the best team in football other than the Chiefs, and everybody had an issue with it then. And then this past season came along, and the Eagles struggled towards the end of the season, and you saw some teams actually stop it, and I think the chatter went down a bit, and it's funny in that aspect because it's only an issue when the team that's really good finds a loophole and just makes them almost impossible to stop. Now that they're struggling a little bit, they seem more normal, like an average team. They're still able to do it, but nobody goes up and makes a big deal out of it because they can stop it, and they're an average team. It's not like they're overpowered in any way. So that's another aspect of it that I thought was pretty just ironic, that it's, they only try and knock you down really when you're the best team in football. They try to find issues when you're at the top, but then when you're average, below average on the standings, nobody has an issue with really whatever that you're doing. And if you do change a play like this, it's not such a complicated play. It's not a new play that it's been around for forever. It's basically a QB sneak. And if you do change it, does that open up this whole box of what you can change, what other people now suggest to change, and then the rules, the nuances of what is actually football start to change. So I think if they change this, it'll lead into more routes of people trying to change, I don't know, other plays of maybe what's considered like a holding or something like that. People will try to change all these other rules, and then it gets made into a bigger mess. So I think the league is better off as they stand right now. As Troy Vincent said, they're not in a place where they think it should be banned, and I think they should continue like this, but we'll see where it ends up. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to follow because of how just ridiculous and big it's all gotten, but we'll just put a pin in that, and I'm going to send it to a quick break. That'll do it for segment 1, but stick around to find out what Caleb Williams, the presumed number 1 pick, said at the NFL Combine today, and what reasons he gave for why he's not throwing, doing any drills at the Combine, and why he's not even presenting a medical at the Combine. All that, plus 2 more other stories coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Don't go anywhere.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows with 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Maradiegue, and if you missed the first segment, I just went over the controversial Tush push and the issue that was brought up with it now in the offseason and teams talking about it, potentially trying to get rid of it, but it's not looking very likely. That was in the first segment. And if you're joining me now, that you're just in time for the second segment of the show, just an update on the trade rumors and potential trade deadline change that could be coming as another rule change that has been brought up recently by the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, Andrew Berry. But before I get into that story, I just want to give you an update on mostly rumors that have been popping up more and more because, like I mentioned before, we are getting into March, or we are in March, actually. It's March 1st. This is where everything starts to pick up. This is where everything, you start to see teams kind of get their backs against the wall and they kind of feel that they got to do something now. So some of the rumors that I thought were pretty prevalent and important now are one of them being the Patriots, and they could end up trading one of their receivers now, arguably one of their better ones, their veteran wide receiver Devontae Parker. He could become available with a trade, and this article was posted by The Athletic, and in the article it said, look for the Patriots to dangle Parker into some trade talks in the coming weeks, even if it's for a late round pick. And that, if they go that route, it kind of supports what I've been saying on the show religiously now at this point. Build up those draft picks, build up the draft capital that you have going, because this team, quite honestly, at the moment, the Patriots aren't really going anywhere just by drafting a world-class quarterback in spot number 3. They could end up doing that, and it works out really well for them, but they need a lot more than just that to get them going. They have a lot of pending free agents that they might have to get rid of, one of them being Kyle Duggar and what his situation looks like, and others among that. They're really ushering in a new era with Gerard Mayo and trying to get things really lined up, kind of projecting everything, what they need to get under control. And I think this is a pretty smart move. Yeah, you're losing a good playmaker, but Devontae Parker is in the later half of his career. And I think they could draft some more wide receivers in this draft. There's a lot of talented ones. And I think Kendrick Bourne is definitely the more talented one, younger one. I think he's the one you can't touch. But then other than that, I'm pretty sure they'd be willing to listen to offers for pretty much anyone on that offense just to increase the quality that they have on this team. That's one trade that could be happening. Another one that's been dominating the news media world has been the Falcons and their interest in Justin Fields. Nothing really much on this front, but one thing that has changed a little bit are the odds for Justin Fields to land with the Falcons. They moved up. They're even favored more now to land them. They're at minus 425. And really, they're the only team I've seen reports on that has reached out to the Bears, made it known that, hey, we're interested potentially, saying to the Bears that, oh, we're here, we're one of those teams that could potentially come with an offer to you soon. But nothing concrete has been made of that. That was reported by NBC Sports, that the Falcons are the only team that has reached out. And other than that, I haven't seen too much. That still continues to be one of the more popular stories heading into March and the official start of free agency. But nothing really too much on that point. Just that the Falcons are really the only team. Another one is the Eagles. And one update that I saw on the way here was that they released their safety, Kevin Byard. They freed up a lot of cap space by releasing him, but he's another one that departs. On top of this one that was reported a few weeks ago. This one might have been even reported closer to the end of the season, but it was Hassan Reddick and the Eagles granting him permission to seek a trade. And that was a pretty surprising one to me, just because of the season that he had prior to last. Yeah, he didn't have the success this past season, but, at the moment I thought it seems pretty far-fetched that they'll actually trade him because was one of the more impactful players, had a great season. But in the other hand, now that I'm thinking about it now, they have other young guys, like Nolan Smith is a big one that was asked about a lot at the Combine with Howie Roseman there. And Howie Roseman actually said that, it might not have been the smartest idea to draft Nolan Smith so high and not really play him as much. I think they'll want to carry that idea into next season, so maybe releasing or trading Hassan Reddick could be in the best interest for all of them, for the Eagles to get younger, try out Nolan Smith. He was drafted in the first round, so if Hassan Reddick's gone, he'll definitely get a lot more playing time. Potentially could become their number one option. If he starts playing now, they'll keep most likely Montez Sweat on the other side if Reddick goes. And it was reported by Josina Anderson for CBS that several teams are actually showing trade interest in Reddick. She also reports that he's sort of looking for a pay raise of some sorts by any team. And one team I saw today was that it could be the in-division rival of the Eagles, the Dallas Cowboys, that could have some serious interest in Hassan Reddick to pair him up with Micah Parsons. And I find it very unlikely, almost impossible, that the Eagles will trade to the Dallas Cowboys. But, if Hassan Reddick will carry a big cap hit, so if they could trade him, I don't know exactly how big of a cap hit, but if it's pretty serious, maybe they'll listen to it. And if he goes there, that'll be great for him, not only because Michael Parsons will take a lot of pressure off of him, he might have a little bit more incentive, more motivation to play against his former team. He'll do better, and I'd be pretty interested to see that. Just an in-division trade, it would be very entertaining, those games, even more than they already are. But, it's still very unlikely thinking about it objectively. So that's one team that I saw that was starting to build up a bit more steam. Another update has to just do quickly with the Jets. General Manager Joe Douglas granted Zach Wilson permission to seek a trade elsewhere. And a lot of reports, everyone seems to have the feeling that, this was to be expected. He's kind of run his course in New York, and with Aaron Rodgers being there, probably at least a year or maybe two more, Zach Wilson will be 26, 27 by then, and if he hasn't played, how much of a market will there be for an older quarterback now? Still in his prime, don't get me wrong, but hasn't had a lot of playing experience. How many teams are really going to want that guy that, still has to really prove himself? He's not going to do it in New York, and by the time he's 27, still really having to prove yourself, it's not very attractive for many teams. So Zach Wilson is still 24, the same age some rookies come into the league, but he's got that NFL experience. He does have the ups and the downs of being in the NFL. So is there a market out there for him to be a starter? I don't think so. To be a starter, not a lot to be a starter, really. The only ones I could think of could be the Raiders. Maybe the Vikings, but it seems they're in a good place with Kirk Cousins right now in terms of extending him. So that one could be a bit far-fetched. I don't think they trade him to the Patriots. Again, another in-division trade seems unlikely. Even if the Patriots aren't talent-wise to the level maybe of the Jets, or they are close. They had some close games, but if Zach Wilson goes there and plays well, it could look very stupid for the Jets, so I don't think they'd risk that. the Rams has been thrown out there, which could be good because Matthew Stafford's on his last, hoorah there with the Los Angeles Rams, and they plan on being good. So how often are you going to be in a position to draft a younger, good quarterback? He could be one, but I think the Raiders makes the most sense to me. Maybe even the Broncos if they trade for him, because Russell Wilson's most likely gone, and you have a young team there still looking to find their footing. I think it could be a good growing point, especially under Sean Payton, that's experienced, tough on him, but I think it'll come good with it for him to have an experienced voice, an older voice, rather than, younger coaches that are just getting into it, into head coaching role positions. I think a more experienced, aged voice would definitely help him out. But who knows how that'll go. He could become a backup somewhere. We'll just have to wait and see. And the biggest one still revolves around L'Jarius Sneed and the Chiefs, and potentially finding a hole where he could fit. The Falcons or actually just the Falcons, are the biggest team linked to him. And NFL insider Tony Pauline reported that he said that the overwhelming feeling in the Chiefs is to expect to be playing without Sneed in 2024, so this coming year. And rather than losing him in free agency and receiving a compensatory pick in 2025, they'll try and trade him and get a better pick this year in just a few months in April. And it makes sense. And the team that's been really rumored to him has been the Falcons. Nothing concrete as of yet, but it's intriguing because the Falcons just seem to be all over the news and interested in everybody. It seems like they're really eager, really active in free agency, trade talks, and everything to really want to push this team to be a competitor just in September when the season starts. So if it all happens, I just keep mentioning because the Falcons could be really good with a lot of good young talent under Raheem Morris and what they're doing over there. So that's exciting to think about. It'll just make the NFC a lot more competitive and exciting, but nothing's been said yet. The Chiefs are open to trade him if they can't work out a long-term deal, but it's still in a point where L'Jarius Sneed would love to stay, but he'll figure it out. And the later this goes, the later I think he'll be pushed out the door. At least that's what the feeling will be by a lot of people, I'm thinking. But the biggest thing I wanted to talk about mostly was the trade deadline pushback that could be coming. The general manager that has been the most active about it, the loudest voice in changing this, was the Browns general manager Andrew Berry. And along with other teams like the Commanders, Eagles, Jets, Lions, and 49ers, they are all kind of vying to push the trade deadline back. They're trying to get it to push back from week 8 all the way, just back to week 10, just 2 more weeks. And they're going to bring it up a lot more strongly at the NFL meeting, the 24th to the 27th. And he's kind of been the voice about it recently, just at the Combine where he's talked about it. And he said, just to support his point, our professional sport has the earliest trade deadline by far. He brought up some numbers and he said, baseball and basketball have their trade deadline after about 65% of their games. Hockey's even higher after 78% of their games. The NFL, arguably the biggest sport in the United States, has theirs after only 45% of their games, not even at the midway point. Pushing it back to week 10 could just increase that number to 55. It would still be the lowest one, but at least you get it at a good balance halfway through. And some of the points that he made to support this I thought were really good. He said on average over 27 teams have been within 2 games at the wild card spot after week 10. And he also said that the earliest team that's been eliminated from the playoffs over the last decade has been after week 11, and that's only happened twice. And, he said those in response to the comeback that, how does this prevent tanking? Because if it's just pushed back a lot more, if it's pushed back 2 weeks, I should say, and teams sitting at a 4-5 record, worse, maybe like a 3-7 record, what? How does that stop them from tanking and, just trading everyone away for draft picks and creating these super teams, essentially? And, he gave those 2 reasons. he said that the data doesn't really support teams tanking because of what I just said. A lot of teams are still in playoff contention, and after the trade deadline, if it is pushed back only 2 weeks, it still wouldn't give teams a lot of time, much incentive to blow up the ship and trade everything away. And just from all the things he brought up, all the articles I read on it, I think it is a good idea, because my biggest thing with pushing it back and the NFL in this aspect is that, it would help a lot with injuries, because a lot of players you see are out for the season after like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then midway through the season, if you get a catastrophic injury and you're past the trade deadline after week 8, you're stuck. It ruins a lot of seasons, entire seasons, even if it's looking promising. If your quarterback goes down, it ruins everything. That season's almost certainly thrown away. So having that trade deadline pushed back 2 weeks, I think would be good in that aspect. And just my biggest thing with the NFL is everything should be balanced. I don't like seeing bye weeks on like week 5, and then after that you got to play like 13 weeks in a row. That's another thing I guess I could propose if I was proposing rule changes, is find a way to make the bye weeks more even halfway through the season of all these teams. But I think just everything in the NFL should be at a balance like that, because it is one of the more, if not the most physical sport in the United States, globally potentially, that this balance, I think, in my opinion, would solve a lot of that, would make it more manageable to deal with these injuries. And, the benefit of just leaving it as it is, the pushback from the league could be, it's worked, why would you change it? And to harp on that topic of tanking, if teams do start to tank, and these teams that have proposed this rule change are wrong, this could all start to be more like the NBA, with a lot of players just requesting trades. You'll see a lot more activity around trade deadline. The NBA is known for having trade deadline be a big event because everybody does it so much. This could kind of push the NFL towards that a little bit. And quite honestly, it just reminds me of like a Madden franchise when you're trading everybody on the team because you want your team to be as good as possible so quick. You definitely don't want that in the NFL, because it'll bring up a lot more issues. So that's the one thing of it. But I think a good middle ground could be week 9, just pushing it back a week instead of week 10. I think the NFL would be more open to it. And you also have to see the NFLPA side of it, if they have any pushback, or if they see maybe not every player agrees with it. Maybe the majority don't. They'll have to get involved if this does become more serious. But I thought that was interesting. Of all the trades, that seems to be the most concrete thing that could be happening, could become a real issue, other than all the trade rumors. So I wanted to touch on that and how it could impact the NFL. But that'll wrap it up for that segment. I will send it to another quick break. But again, don't go anywhere, because coming up, I'll let you know what Caleb Williams said today at the Combine, as well as letting you know any other free agency moves that could be coming. Some teams very active, some teams not. And a quarterback who has gotten a lot more answers solved over the last few days than he did just a few days ago. All that coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here quickly on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Just bringing you guys a quick update on free agency and all the things that I have seen. Some more surprising than others. Just jumping straight into it. The Falcons, surprisingly, right, are active in free agency, as well as the Titans. They could both be potentially in on the Jets, offensive tackle Mekhi Becton. According to Tony Pauline, he said that the Tennessee Titans obviously need an offensive tackle. Some would say they need 2 new players at that position. The need at offensive tackle in Atlanta is not great yet. What makes this such an intriguing signing, in his words, is that the Falcons' O-line coach, Dwayne Ledford, was Mekhi Becton's position coach when he was at Louisville. So the connections are there with the Falcons more so than the Titans. And Mekhi Becton hasn't had the greatest success in New York. He's always been, it seems, injured because he is a big dude, much bigger than a lot of offensive tackles, it seems. And he's had a lot of nagging issues, muscle injuries, and stuff like that. But I didn't know that about Mekhi Becton and the connection to the Falcons, so that would be interesting if that happened. I think the Falcons would definitely benefit more because they do seem like they're pushing the pedal hard to be good, be one of the more prominent teams in the NFL. And if they could shore up that offensive line that was already pretty solid, very good, just based on the running game that they had, I think it would be very good for this team to just strengthen an already strong part of their team and really make it solidified and arguably one of their strongest points on the team. Moving on to some other potential signings, the Lions are expected to meet with Amon-Ra St. Brown's representatives at the NFL Combine to discuss extending him. And that might not seem important, but thinking about it more, I think if they're able to get Amon-Ra St. Brown's deal done before he hits free agency next offseason, I think it'd be a lot more beneficial for the Lions because of all the rumors and chatter that Justin Jefferson he's going to get a new deal, but that he wants to reset the wide receiver market. And, instead of waiting for the Vikings to, pay a crazy amount for Justin Jefferson and who knows, pay him like $33 or $34 million per year, and then Amon-Ra still waiting for his deal. What if he wants to reset the wide receiver market? What if he wants to get paid that amount of money and the Lions can't afford him at that point? So I think if they get this deal done sooner rather than later, it'll benefit them, save some more money in their back pocket. If he wants to reset the wide receiver market, maybe it's only 31 or 32 max. And then the Vikings and Justin Jefferson will in turn have to pay more because I'm sure he's all set on trying to be the highest paid receiver. Not that he's not earned it, but I think the Lions could greatly benefit this way in the long term if they were to extend them sooner rather than later. I'm sure both parties want to get it done, so it shouldn't be a problem, but the negotiations always take time with things like this. That brings me to the other potential extension talks with the Chiefs and their issue going on with Chris Jones. Diana Rossini reported that this issue around Chris Jones and the Chiefs, people are starting to become more optimistic that they'll be able to sign Chris Jones to an extension. Other teams are still monitoring the situation pretty closely, but it doesn't seem like anything will go wrong. In case something does go wrong, those teams will start to chime in a little bit more to Chris Jones, but it really only seems to be Chris Jones and the Chiefs in constant communication, trying to get a long-term deal done. Why would Chris Jones want to leave? But in the same hand, he has to get paid because of what he's done for that team. So they're still trying to balance that out, but it does seem very likely that he'll remain there, especially if L'Jarius Sneed is second on that totem pole of urgent signings for the Chiefs. I think Chris Jones will get it done, and they'll be willing to live without L'Jarius Sneed, like Tony Pauline reported before that I translated to you guys. The Chiefs are almost preparing for time away after L'Jarius Sneed in case they were to lose him this year. So that only pushes Chris Jones to stay even further. And, I think that'll be good. That's the most likely thing to happen. In other news, in free agency, the Seattle Seahawks, I talked about them before, about Mike McDonald's comments on Geno Smith and Drew Lock and really not committing to them 100%, unquestionably backing them. He mostly said he's in a state of unsure. He doesn't really know what kind of situation this could be in a few months. He said that both, one or neither could be on the team. He's just really starting to get to know them. But now it was reported just a few days ago by Jordan Schultz that QB Geno Smith has actually been told by Seattle's front office that he will be on the team guaranteed in 2024 under his current contract. And you might be thinking, all right, that could have been expected, but what I found pretty intriguing was that, it came from the front office. Office members maybe higher than the head coach, and it just makes me think a little bit, question the report to come out pretty soon after Mike Macdonald's comments. I'm not saying this is true at all, but it just makes me think that, Geno Smith might have heard that, might not have liked it, and, he went to the front office, the owner, the general manager, and, he could have gone up to them and asked them, where do I stand? Why is the new head coach saying this? I thought we were in a good spot getting to know each other. I thought he would commit to me. He could have brought all those questions to the front office and looking for answers, urging them to give him an answer, and they told him that, he's going to stay 100%. And that's an interesting dynamic there because, it's coming from the front office, two different viewpoints on the situation around their quarterbacks. Potentially that could become something else. Nothing is facts about this. It's just an inkling that I have that the way that it was phrased by Jordan Schultz, that this decision came from the front office. They made the decision. They told Geno Smith that, not to worry. This upcoming season, you're going to be on this team. No questions asked. And how that relationship could or could not affect the relationship Geno Smith has with Mike Macdonald, that'll be to be determined. But that's where that was. Geno Smith doesn't have to worry. The Seahawks will certainly have one quarterback on their roster leading them into next year. Does that stop him from looking elsewhere? Probably not. If Geno Smith is into his 30s and already restructured his contract, how much more does he have after back-to-back 9-8 seasons? How much better do you see him getting as he gets older? All those questions I'm sure will be brought up potentially at the end of this year or during the season if things start to get pretty bad. But we'll see where that ends up. And one of the last things I wanted to talk about here, I actually got this news when I was leaving the studio yesterday. The Vikings released starting running back Alexander Mattison. He's becoming a free agent like he was last year, but last year he signed a 2-year deal with the Vikings, and now they're releasing him with a year left on his contract. And that's just more icing on the cake, on this whole cake of the running back free agency market, the value that the running backs get. If you want to say the lack of respect, you could say that. Not to say that the Vikings are completely wronging this. Alexander Mattison wasn't a top 5 to 10 quarterback, really. He got injured a couple weeks. He struggled with fumbles at times. He didn't put up the gaudy numbers that could make a good case for him to be really mad at why the Vikings released him. And because of the Vikings situation, trying to extend Justin Jefferson, he is the main priority other than Kirk Cousins. They need this money to come in from elsewhere to make sure Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins are on the team 100%. That's what's been harped all throughout the offseason by Kevin O'Connell and just the whole Vikings organization, that they really would love Kirk Cousins back. And of course, no one's going to doubt them when they say they need Justin Jefferson on that team for the long run. He's going to want a lot of money, and somebody was most likely going to have to go. Unfortunately, it's Alexander Mattison, now adding to that list of running backs in the free agent market. And, where do the Vikings go from here in terms of running back? They have another running back on the team. I just can't remember his name. That did very solid. He did all right when Alexander Mattison was injured. to just carry the torch and move the organization along, not have that position be a hole in the offense. But now, they're trying to push for something, compete in the NFC North. I would assume they want a top-tier running back on their team. They would love to have one. But it is going to be difficult now if they're of the mindset of saving that money for Kirk and Justin Jefferson. One, they're going to have to get those deals done quick to then sign someone, potentially draft someone. They could. It's a pretty even playing field class of running backs in free agency. So I think they are not in free agency in the draft. So they could go that route and just see what they have in the draft, really evaluate these running backs. Because I don't think a lot of teams will be drafting them high. So the Vikings will have an opportunity to draft one of the better ones, potentially earlier than a lot of teams, because I just don't see too many teams dying for starting running backs. And with the amount of running backs that are in free agency, the Vikings might not be able to pay them. So that just makes it even more open for them to take essentially their pick of the running back class, because Saquon's going to get signed somewhere. Derrick Henry's going to get signed somewhere. Austin Eckler is most likely going to be somewhere. Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs. All these running backs, they're going to end up somewhere. So that's just going to fill more of the holes for the limited amount of teams already that needed a running back. So the Vikings could have their open pick of picking anybody in the draft that they'd like. But that's still in the early process of it. I was pretty surprised at this. But after dissecting it a little bit more, it does make sense. And Alexander Mattison will be looking for a new home, looking to contribute to another team in 2024, in the 2024-2025 season. So we'll see where that ends up and where that will take us. But where we're going now in terms of this show is Caleb Williams, the presumed number one pick in the draft, has finally come out to talk to the media, give his thoughts on some things that has been said about him, and just give his thoughts on the upcoming draft, mostly what he thinks of the Bears, and just letting everyone in on his personality a little bit. Definitely me. I'll give my thoughts on what he said and how I project him now going forward in the offseason. So don't go anywhere. I'll be back after this short break. You've been watching the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. For the last time on this episode and for the week, I wanted to get into what Caleb Williams said at the NFL Combine today. But before I dive into a good amount of the comments I picked out from his media availability, I wanted to remind you guys one last time to please, if you have any questions, if you want to engage with the show and ask me questions during the live show, to please use the tip and donations link running across the ticker below me. We have a new link to it. It's gsmcpodcast.net. A lot shorter, easier to remember. It's gsmcpodcast.net. This just makes sure I'm able to see it. Your chats pop up right away on the right-hand side over here to my right. And it's a big help for the show, for the network, and it's greatly appreciated every time you guys do that. But going back to Caleb Williams, talking about him, he checked in at the combine, and when these big name quarterbacks come in at the combine, all the attention goes to them. How are they going to perform in the drills? Talk to the media about these teams. But Caleb Williams is only doing one of that. He is only talking to everyone, meeting with teams. He is not going to be throwing or taking part in any of the drills tomorrow on Saturday. He only spoke really for the first time since the end of the college season. He's been very, he's kept to himself a lot, hasn't been really vocal on anything, not talking on any podcast, on his social media. He's just kind of kept to himself, probably working out and just getting some training in. But, this is the first time he's been out in the public space, seeing all the media around the NFL. He met with the Bears general manager Ryan Poles and head coach Matt Eberflus for the first time on Wednesday night. Now he's back at the combine talking with everyone. And one of the first quote I wanted to bring up was that just his overall thoughts on the Bears when they asked him about it. He said the Bears was an 8-9 team last year, 7-10. Sorry. That's pretty good for a team that has the first pick. They got a good defense. They got good players on offense, and it's pretty exciting if you could go into a situation like that. The general basis thing. Later on in the interview and just in the article I read from CBS, or actually Yahoo Sports, one thing that Williams wants from the organization that drafts him most of all is that he stressed a lot that he is a winner. He wants to win. That's basically the tipping point, the tiebreaker, whatever you want to call it, in these discussions that he has with teams. He said that when he's talking with other teams, he's gauging them as well as they're evaluating him. He's trying to see how bad they want to win, how bad they are determined to improve, and that's one thing he wants to do. He wants to go to a place that can foster his development and help him reach his potential. That's a big point that a lot of outlets have said. So he wants to, get a gauge on all these teams that are interested in him, how bad each of them wants to play. He also mentioned with the Commanders that he would love to play for them as well. He's obviously from that area in Washington, so he added that in there. He also gave a reason why he gave that interview with ESPN before the draft. And his words were, "Y'all rarely see me speak, ever. As y'all know, I don't really go out and speak much, but this was important to me, that I wanted to put something out there before I came here, especially with all the noise and things like that that's been brewing." And that's another thing that I saw over this past week. One executive or somebody connected to college football said that he looked into the NIL money and all the things that Caleb Williams was able to benefit off of in college, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, that it was definitely not like having a college quarterback on your roster. It was more like having an NFL player with how big, how popular he had become. And when I saw that, I thought a lot of people could take that the wrong way. They could take it as, Caleb Williams feels that he is a bigger player than he is. He might have a bigger head than most people really know. He's not vocal about what he thinks, what he's feeling. He doesn't post that much on Instagram, so a lot of people don't get to see insight into what he really is like. So if they see a report like that, they might think like, oh, this guy's way in over his head. He thinks he's bigger than he is. He thinks he's more valuable than what the team values are. And, he came up to the podium. He defended himself. He gave a reason why he wanted to talk. And I thought that was very important. But moving on to another issue that might rub people a little bit the wrong way is that he's not doing the medical at the combine. And just his thoughts on that were that he said I didn't feel the need to go out there and throw. Or actually, that's the wrong quote. He said, "For the medical stuff, I'll be doing the medical stuff, just not here in Indy. I'll be doing it at the team interviews. Not 32 teams can draft me. There's only one of me. So the teams that I get to for my visit, so the teams that will have my medicals, so the teams that I will meet with will have my medicals, and that will be it." Again, all these comments to me seem that, he's very straightforward. He's not going to really sugarcoat anything. He's telling it how it is. He seems like very determined on what's best for him. And he made that shown to everybody on why he's not throwing. At the combine, he said, "I didn't feel the need to go out and throw. I played around 30-something games, I believe. Go ahead, go watch the real live ball of me and see how I am as a competitor." Nothing, it all just kind of wraps it all together. And, he went on to say other things about his leadership, what type of leader that he is, what kind of gauge he got from Eberflus and Ryan Poles. And after I read that, to be quite honest, I didn't know too much about Caleb Williams, how he was as a person, how his character was. I did tune in, obviously, to watch some games because of the excitement news around him, but that was pretty much it. And I think that's where a lot of people stand. They know who he is as a player, his talents through the roof. He's exciting, he's magical, creative, all the adjectives you want to throw onto him. But you got to know him as a person. That's a huge thing Ryan Poles mentioned over this past week in the combine, that, he's got to get to know the person. That's a huge part of it, especially in a big market like Chicago, where there's a bunch of news, a bunch of critics every day, after the games, before the games, throughout the week. It could get very loud for some people, and a lot of people might not be able to deal with that. And he has to get to know the person. And I think Caleb Williams, after this interview, gave a good impression, at least to me. Gave me a bit more insight into the kind of person that he is. I feel that he is a very tight-knit circle kind of person. He doesn't let a lot of people in. He's got his own group of people that he trusts. Like I mentioned before on a few past episodes, that he doesn't even have an agent. It's just his dad, his publicist, and his team that he has around him that handle everything. So, he's got his close friends, his close team that he, trusts. But other than that, he's not collaborating with other people. He's not on social media. He's not voicing what he thinks. He's very honed in on himself, getting the best out of himself. And I think, one, that's a great quality to have if you're a quarterback. But it kind of paints a better picture of yourself for everyone around the league, kind of letting them know what you're about. He's really all about business, at least from what he said at the combine. I'm not in the meetings. I didn't ask him much deeper questions, but just on those quotes, he seems like one of those guys. If I were to compare him to somebody, he kind of gives me the energy that an Anthony Edwards would, a Jimmy Butler, CJ Stroud to a certain extent. I think CJ Stroud's a bit more, he's been more active on social media, doing other stuff outside of football. But those guys, Jimmy Butler, Anthony Edwards, whenever I see them talk, they're only really talking about basketball ever. They don't show their personal life outside of the sport they play. After the NBA finals are over, after however far their team goes, it seems like you don't hear about them at all, at least from them, for a long time, months, until the season comes back. Then they start to become more active, more involved with everything. And Caleb Williams kind of gives me that vibe from him a little bit, that energy that he is all about this. He doesn't really care about what everybody else has to say, what is being said about him, unless it's very damaging to his character. He won't really bat an eye to it. On top of that, I think that could put off a lot of teams if he's very honed in on himself. Some people might think he's very narcissistic, potentially, if they wrap it the wrong way. But I think with a lot of teams, they'll see this. I think they'll really be attached to this sort of personality that he has if they support him with the right amount of people, coach him the right way. But also a lot of teams, there's only going to be 3 teams really that'll draft him. So he doesn't really have to worry about what all the other teams think, just the main 3 that will most likely draft him. But the only thing, I guess, the negative I could produce out of all of this, I've said a lot of positive things about Caleb. The only thing that worries me is if he does go to the Bears and say it's a total disaster, it all doesn't go well, they're struggling, The coaching's not really there. People in the media start bringing up the coaching and, like, oh, this play, how was this play supposed to work? No one's open. Or the defense isn't helping Caleb Williams. The coaching has no idea what they're doing. You always hear that around rookie quarterbacks and just in general in the NFL. So I feel like if things start to go down that route, this could all turn pretty ugly in a sense, because if it has to do with football, I'm sure he'll let it be known, but personal life, other things he's got going on, he won't really mention. But if it has to do with football, I feel like he would be a person that, airs his frustration, because he's very honed in on getting the best out for himself, reaching his full potential. And if he feels the team isn't on that same page, I started this whole thing with saying, he said that he was also gauging the Bears and how bad they want to win. If he feels that, they're not doing everything that they can to help this team win, I feel like he'll voice his frustrations, and that creates a lot more issues if you air out, the dirty laundry in the locker room, so to say, using that analogy. But that's the only thing negative I could really dig out from this. It's very early in the process to really see who he is as a person. He's got to get to a team really before you judge him, how he interacts with his teammates and how he integrates himself into a team, becoming that leader, becoming the face of a franchise. That's all down the road. I'm very excited to see how it pans out. This was definitely a good first impression, I think, not just for me, but for a lot of people in the NFL, to get to know Caleb Williams a little bit more. But just like I said, we will see where he takes us, where this combine takes us. Everything could be shaken up in just a matter of days, so who knows where we'll end up. But in terms of this show, where we'll end up on this show, we are at the end, unfortunately, of the podcast of the week show. So with that being said, again, as always, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone listening, or who tuned in late, or who watches afterwards as well. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok for more of the network's content. There's a lot of good stuff out there outside of this show and outside of sports, quite frankly, as well. There's a lot of podcasts out there. And if you do want to see more of me and the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, please make sure to check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube for more of the live shows that I've already done, more of the YouTube shorts that I also produce, individual segments for the whole entire segments, entire live shows, if you don't want to see the whole live show or just want to tune in for one segment. But with all that being said, as always, I've been your host, Manny Maradiegue. Tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL and football conversations. Have a good weekend, guys. Take care, and I will see you guys all on Monday.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.